Welcome back to The Truth of Money, where we follow the money to find the truth the mainstream media won't tell you. Egypt, 1700 BCE. Pharaoh wakes in terror. In his dream, 7 fat cows were devoured by 7 skeletal cows. No one in his court could interpret this dream. Not his priests, not his advisors, not his magicians. But there's someone in his dungeon who can explain it. And what happens next isn't just a story about dream interpretation. This is the birth of the world's first strategic reserve system, the first recorded example of turning information into institutional power, the moment someone realized that controlling supply during scarcity is worth more than all the gold in a kingdom. This is the story of Prophet Joseph, a man who went from slavery to captivity to minister of economy, who didn't just predict a crisis, he weaponized it. And the system he built, we're still using it today. Let's set the stage. Joseph wasn't Egyptian, he was Hebrew. Thrown into a pit by his own brothers, sold to Egyptian merchants. He worked as a slave in Potiphar's house. Falsely accused, thrown into prison. But he has a skill that no one else in Egypt possesses, the ability to interpret dreams that others cannot see. When Pharaoh's cupbearer mentions this prisoner who correctly predicted his own future, Pharaoh has nothing to lose. Joseph is brought before him. And here's where things get interesting. Joseph doesn't just say, "Looks like 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. Good luck with that." He does something most advisors never do. He turns diagnosis into prescription. He says, this isn't just a warning, this is a window of opportunity. And if you act now, Egypt won't just survive the famine, it will own it. Think about that. Everyone saw a dream. Joseph saw a market opportunity. Pharaoh immediately makes him minister of economy. Not because Joseph predicted the future, because he had a plan for it. So what does Joseph do? Does he throw a party? Build monuments? Enjoy his new power? No. He builds the world's first centralized reserve system. Here's the plan. During the 7 years of abundance, every farmer must give 20% of their harvest to the state. Not as tax. As insurance. Grain is collected, recorded, stored in massive state-controlled silos across Egypt. No private hoarding allowed. No free market for surplus grain. The state holds everything. Now, if you're a farmer, you're probably uncomfortable with this situation, right? Why is the government taking my grain when there's plenty? But Joseph isn't governing for today. He's governing for 7 years from now. And here's the key insight. In times of plenty, people forget that scarcity exists. But Joseph doesn't forget. So while everyone celebrates the harvest, he's doing something no one in history had done at this scale. He's turning abundance into leverage. Because he knows something they don't. Scarcity isn't a disaster, it's a power shift. And when it comes, whoever controls the supply controls everything. 7 years pass. The harvests are incredible. The silos are full. The richest period in Egyptian history. Farmers are beginning to understand the logic of the system. 20% didn't seem like much after all. They're getting rich with the remaining 80%. Trade is flourishing. Cities are growing. Egypt is experiencing a golden age. And then, the time of famine comes, the rain stops. Year 8, the Nile doesn't flood. Crops wither. The soil cracks. Farmers look at the silos in fear. For the first time, they don't feel the absence of that 20%. On the contrary, they're grateful. Suddenly, no one complains about the 20% storage tax anymore because Egypt is the only place in the region with food. Canaan is starving. Syria is starving. Libya is starving. But Egypt? Egypt has reserves for years. And who controls these reserves? Not the people. Not the regional governors. Not even Pharaoh, really. Joseph controls them. Think about the power dynamic here. Gold? Useless. You can't eat it. Silver? Irrelevant. Land? If it won't grow food, it has no meaning. The only currency that matters now is grain. And Joseph holds the vault. This is where Joseph's system shows its true genius. He's not just distributing food, he's using it to restructure the entire economy. Phase 1. People come with money. Joseph sells them grain. The state gets rich. Egypt's treasuries fill with gold and silver. But the famine continues. Phase 2. Money runs out. People think they have nothing left to pay with. But Joseph offers a solution. Bring your animals, your horses, your cattle, your goats, your sheep. I'll give you grain. Thousands of horses, camels, cattle become state property. Now the state controls Egypt's transportation infrastructure, its agricultural power. Phase 3. The animals run out. People are desperate. Joseph now takes their land. Land that has been in families for generations becomes state property. Does this seem ruthless? Maybe. But what was the alternative? Dying of starvation. Phase 4. Nothing is left. People have no land, no animals, no money. And Joseph offers a deal. You work the land, but the state owns it. You keep 80%, we take 20%. People accept. They have no other choice. But here's the most interesting part. They're satisfied with this deal. Because they're not dying of starvation. Because they're still producing. Because 80% is much better than nothing. In 5 years, Joseph effectively nationalized Egypt's economy. Not through war, not through revolution, through crisis management. Now, some people hear this and think, this seems exploitative. Maybe, but here's the counter-argument. Without Joseph's system, Egypt would have collapsed like everyone around them. There would have been riots, starvation, chaos, anarchy, social collapse. Instead, social order held. People survived. Children were fed. Cities remained standing. The state grew stronger. Joseph didn't create the famine, but he created the only system that could survive it. And here's the uncomfortable truth about crisis economics. Those who prepare don't just survive, they consolidate power. But Joseph's vision goes beyond Egypt's borders. Because remember, the entire region is starving, and they all come to Egypt. Caravans from Canaan, traders from Syria, delegations from distant kingdoms, nomads from Libya. They come with gold, silver, trade goods. They bring precious stones, spices, silk, and they beg for grain. Joseph sets the terms. Egypt doesn't just survive the famine. Egypt becomes the economic center of the known world. Every neighboring power is now dependent on Egypt's supply chains. This is the same playbook we see today. OPEC controlling oil. How? The 1973 oil embargo. Arab countries shut off the oil tap. Western economies collapsed. Gas lines, energy crisis. And OPEC wrote the New World Order, or China controlling rare earth minerals. 97% of the world's technology depends on China's neodymium, lithium, cobalt. Electric cars, smartphones, wind turbines, all tied to China's supply chain. Whenever China wants, it can condemn the world to technological starvation, or the United States controlling the global reserve currency, the dollar. More than 80% of world trade is conducted in dollars. When the Federal Reserve changes interest rates, emerging market economies shake. When America applies economic sanctions, that country is cut off from the global system. Whoever controls the essential resource writes the rules. Joseph understood this 3,700 years ago. And here's the most fascinating part. He never used this power for personal revenge. Remember, his own brothers sold him into slavery. They threw him in a pit, left him for dead. Told their father Jacob a wild animal devoured him. They destroyed Joseph's life. And guess who came to Egypt desperate for food? Those same brothers. They came twice. The first time, Joseph didn't reveal his identity. He tested them, held Simeon hostage, said, "Bring your youngest brother." He wanted to see if they had changed. The second time, they came with their youngest brother, Benjamin. Joseph set up a trap with a cup, accused Benjamin of theft, and then watched his brother's reaction. Judah stepped forward. "Take me instead of Benjamin. Our father can't bear it. If we take him, our father will die." At that moment, Joseph understood. They had changed. They were repentant. And with tears, he revealed his identity. "I am Joseph, your brother. Don't grieve about what you did to me, because God sent me here before you to save your lives." Joseph had absolute power over them. He could have destroyed them, could have taken revenge, could have put them in chains. But he didn't. He used his power not to destroy, but to restore. He brought his entire family to Egypt, gave them the best land, the region of Goshen, pastures for their flocks, protected his family. And here's where the difference between a tyrant and a statesman emerges. A tyrant hoards power for ego, uses it for revenge, crushes his enemies. A statesman uses power to build systems that will outlast him, uses it to restore society, uses it to build the future. So why does a Bronze Age famine matter in 2025? Because the structure is the same. Let's connect the dots. Strategic reserves. The U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve was created after the 1970s oil crisis. 700 million barrels of oil stored in underground salt caverns. When the Russia-Ukraine war started, the Biden administration released 1 million barrels per day. Oil prices fell. America used its energy weapon. Likewise, central banks holding gold and foreign currency. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet is $9 trillion. The European Central Bank's is 7 trillion euros. When the 2008 crisis hit, these reserves saved the system. China stockpiling rare earths and semiconductors. Strategic resource nationalism. If tomorrow China says we're no longer exporting neodymium, world technology production stops. Crisis equals power shift. The 2008 financial crisis. Lehman Brothers collapsed. Bear Stearns disappeared. The global financial system fell to its knees. And central banks became the most powerful institutions on earth. They printed trillions of dollars. They lowered interest rates to zero. They bought bonds. They purchased corporate debt. They saved the system. But in return, they gained unlimited power. Now it's not elected governments, but central banks running the economy. Or COVID-19. The first months of the pandemic, no masks, no gloves, no ventilators, no vaccine. Which countries had vaccine production capacity? China, Vietnam, Taiwan. They set the terms. Which countries developed vaccines? USA, Germany, UK. They decided who gets what and when. Rich countries stockpiled millions of doses. Poor countries waited in line. Power shift. Or the Ukraine war. Russia shut off the natural gas tap. Europe entered an energy crisis. Germany closed factories. Electricity bills skyrocketed. Europe realized energy dependence is a security issue. Now they're dependent on Norwegian gas, US LNG. They're rebuilding energy infrastructure, spending billions of dollars because they learned those who don't control vital resources become the controlled. Food as geopolitical leverage. Russia blocked Ukrainian grain exports in 2022. Black Sea blockade. Ukraine is one of the world's breadbaskets. African and Middle Eastern countries depend on Ukrainian wheat. Russia closed the tap. Food prices soared. Egypt, Lebanon, Yemen, Somalia face the threat of starvation. Russia blackmailed, "Support us, we'll release the grain." Food became a weapon. Countries banned rice and wheat exports during shortages. India stopped wheat exports in 2022. Vietnam limited rice exports. Kazakhstan blocked flour. Everyone thought of their own citizens first. The global supply chain broke. Food prices hit records, inflation exploded, and the silent global race for water resources. Ethiopia built a dam on the Nile River. Egypt and Sudan objected. "You're cutting off our water." Tension rose. War threats. India and Pakistan are fighting over the Indus River. China controls the Mekong River. Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia are dependent. China controls water levels. Drought or flood? China decides. Joseph's playbook never disappeared. It just became more sophisticated. Every government in the world is trying to answer the same question Joseph answered. What do we control that others will desperately need? And once you control it, you don't just survive the crisis, you rewrite the rules afterward. Now here's the question we need to sit with. Was Joseph's system just? He didn't create the famine, but he used it to centralize power. He saved lives. But he also made people economically dependent on the state. He turned abundance into insurance, but he also turned scarcity into leverage. There's no clear answer here, because crisis management is always a moral tightrope. Those who prepare for disaster are often accused of fear-mongering, until the disaster happens. Then they're accused of profiteering, but we can say this. Systems matter more than intentions. Joseph built a system that worked. It prevented mass starvation. It maintained social order. It turned Egypt into a regional superpower. And whether you see this as brilliant governance or economic coercion depends on what you value more, freedom and prosperity or survival and scarcity. Most people want both. History says you can rarely keep both. So what's the lesson? Information is only valuable if you act on it. Joseph didn't just know the famine was coming. He built infrastructure before anyone believed him. That's the gap between insight and impact. And here's the truth. The next crisis is already forming. Maybe energy, maybe water, maybe land, maybe something we haven't even named yet. But somewhere, right now, someone is building the system to control it. The question is, will you understand how that system works before you're dependent on it? Because the answers aren't in the headlines. They're in the patterns. And the patterns? They've been here for thousands of years. You just need to know where to look. The past doesn't repeat, but the structure does. Follow this channel before the next crisis hits, because the answers are always hidden in the past. Tell us in the comments, what do you think the next crisis will be?